Steps have been taken in the recent past to replace the dollar by resorting to national currencies in bilateral trading arrangements between BRICS countries. These arrangements reduce transaction costs and eliminate political risks. In parallel, central banks, notably the People's Bank of China, have established bilateral swap lines in national currencies, increasingly serving as a source of external liquidity and balance of payments support, including for non-BRICS countries, Argentina being a case in point. One possible way forward would be to gradually increase the number and scope of these bilateral arrangements. Another would be to multilateralize these initiatives among our 5 countries. This is Remax, your source for the geopolitical news that impacts your life. We break down the complex, we expose the hidden, we bring you the analysis you need. Get ready, get informed. Before we dive in, please hit the like and subscribe button on this channel. On the initiative of Russia, this idea of a new currency to be established by the BRICS has been under discussion since 2022 but is still in its infancy. The background of this possible currency is the growing dysfunctionality of the international monetary system which, since the Second World War, revolves around a hegemonic currency, the US dollar. The fundamental contradiction, as is well known, lies in the fact that the international system depends predominantly on a single national currency, managed according to the interests of the state that created it. I note in passing that this contradiction would not be eliminated if the dollar-based international system were to be replaced by a renminbi-based system or, a more likely scenario, by a multi-currency international system, where the dollar would continue to gradually lose ground to the renminbi and other international liquid currencies. In the last 70 years or so, it has been the world's dominant currency, fulfilling international functions as a unit of account, currency of denomination of contracts and prices, reserve currency, and means of payment. However, it has always remained a national currency managed by a national central bank. Nothing guarantees that US priorities coincide with the broader interests of the international system that depends on the US dollar. The above-mentioned problems of the current international monetary system are well known. The novelty in recent years is that the US has been using its currency more and more aggressively to pursue political and geopolitical goals. A weaponization of the dollar took place, that is, the use of the national international currency and of the Western financial system to target hostile countries or countries seen as such. Among others, Venezuela, Iran, Afghanistan and, on a vast scale, Russia were targets of sanctions and punitive measures that could only be enforced because the dollar and the US financial system occupy the position they do in the world. Reluctant, since the traumatic experience in Vietnam, to put boots on the ground and risk their soldiers in current wars, the US and its allies have put their currencies to work as proxy warriors and intended weapons of mass economic and financial destruction. Russia's case is unprecedented. After the invasion of Ukraine, the USA and its European allies decreed the freezing of Russian official reserves invested in dollars and euros to the amount of around $300 billion, roughly half of Russia's liquid international assets. If this can happen, anything can happen. Evidently, the use and abuse of the dollar's privileged position leads to a loss of legitimacy of the prevailing international monetary system. It has caused an erosion of confidence in the dollar, and confidence is an indispensable requirement for any currency. In one sentence, the United States is today the main enemy of the dollar as a world currency. Thus, an environment conducive to discussions on the reform of the monetary system and the de-dollarization of international transactions was created by the US itself. It was in this context that discussions began in the BRICS on the convenience of relying less on the dollar and moving perhaps towards a monetary association and eventually a common currency. What paths could be taken? The issue is complex, at the same time financial and political. The terrain is new for the BRICS, still unexplored by us. I will try to address just a few aspects here, without intending to exhaust the subject or even to formulate its general lines in a comprehensive way, not least because it is perhaps too early to present specific and detailed proposals which would require careful consideration. Existence, it could be just a digital currency. Nor would it be necessary or recommendable to create a central bank of the BRICS, responsible for conducting monetary policy for the 5 countries, something impractical for several reasons. In other words, the purpose is not to create a single currency that would replace the 5 national currencies. It would be enough to create an issuing bank in charge of issuing R5 according to predetermined rules without interfering with the actions of the 5 central banks, which would continue to perform all the typical functions of a monetary authority, that is, the definition of interest rates, the conduct of foreign exchange and open market operations, the management of international reserves, in addition to financial regulation and supervision tasks. There would be therefore no loss of monetary sovereignty for the BRICS countries. The R5 would only be a virtual currency for international transactions, initially between central banks. It could, as indicated previously, serve as a store of value to allow surplus BRICS countries to maintain in R5 accumulated balances in transactions carried out with other BRICS countries in bilateral trade arrangements. As the R5 becomes more accepted, it could function more widely as a store of value and a means of applying international reserves. In this sense, it would be similar to the proposal for the creation of the Bancor, formulated by Keynes in the early 1940s, in an unsuccessful attempt to prevent the domination of the dollar in the post-war international monetary system. Conceptually, the R5 is also similar to a proposal for the creation of a common currency in South America that was made in 2022 by the current Brazilian finance minister, Fernando Haddad, and one of the directors of the Central Bank of Brazil, Gabriel Galípolo. The new BRICS currency, it should be stressed, would not replace the 5 national currencies, not even in the long run. Our 5 countries are very far from meeting the minimum criteria, economic and political, required to make a monetary union conceivable. The R5 would be a parallel currency, coexisting with the 5 national currencies, being used primarily in how to proceed then, how to ensure trust in and widespread acceptance of the R5. One possibility would be to make the R5 convertible into bonds guaranteed by the 5 countries. The R5 issuing bank would also be in charge of issuing R5 bonds at different maturities and interest rates. The R5 would be freely convertible into R5 bonds, backed by assets created by the issuing bank itself. The R5 would actually be a fiduciary currency, of the same nature as the dollar and other international liquid currencies. The R5 bonds would be the concrete financial expression of the guarantee that the 5 countries would give to the new currency. This approach harks back to historically important monetary reforms, notably the German hyperstabilization of 1923, the so-called Rentenmark miracle, in a situation where an alternative to gold and to the dollar had to be sought to credibly return a new currency for Germany. A more recent source of inspiration is the way modern currencies function in their relation to treasury bonds and the financial system. Most modern currencies are purely fiduciary currencies, freely convertible, if not in dollars or other internationally liquid currencies, into obligations issued by the government that are liquid, remunerated and carry little or no credit risk. The entry into circulation of the new currency would occur through the actions of the 5 national states. Circulation could start between central banks and gradually extend to other government operations and also to transactions with extra BRIC central banks. The New Development Bank (NBD), the group's main practical initiative so far, could play a role, as President Putin highlighted in a recent meeting with the bank's current president, Dilma Rousseff. The NDB could contribute in at least 3 ways to the process of de-dollarization of the world economy. First and most obviously by accelerating the de-dollarization of its asset and liability operations, issuing bonds and making loans in the national currencies of the bank's member countries. Second, through its research department, by supporting studies and conferences on the reform of the international system and the eventual creation of the R5. Third, at a more advanced stage by helping to bring the new currency into circulation, extending loans and issuing bonds denominated and payable in R5. To advance this complex discussion, the leaders of the BRICS at their 2023 summit may ask their finance ministers and research institutes to study the matter in a coordinated way and present the results of this work at the next BRICS summit, to be held in 2024 in Russia. A group of experts could be set up to assess the convenience and feasibility of creating a BRICS currency. I don't know if the matter has advanced far enough, and if there is consensus among the countries to deepen discussions on this subject. If the discussion does advance, the BRICS leaders could at their next summit, in 2024, take the decision to start formally discussing the viability of a new currency. The decision to create the R5 might then be taken at the 2025 summit, under the Brazilian presidency. One final word: expectations have been created by the BRICS themselves and by other countries. As dissatisfaction with the US dollar and the current international monetary system increases in countries of the global south, including our own, people tend to look to the BRICS group in the hope that we will provide trustworthy alternatives to the dollar and the Western financial system. Let us not let them down by shying away from matters that are of global interest. That's your update. Did we miss anything? Did something make you think? Hit the comments. Let's keep this conversation going. Like what you heard? Share this video, spread the word. And don't forget to subscribe to Remax, your geopolitical edge. Until next time.